Yesterday, the Office for Budget Responsibility published a report entitled Fiscal Risks and Sustainability, and this was all about government spending over the next few decades. And what they had to say was very interesting in a certain sense. So let's bring on a graph. They're talking about projected total government revenue and spending. And as you can see, they are projecting that government spending is going to go through the roof over the next few decades. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of them, by the way, the headline is that the government debt is going to increase from currently about 100% of GDP to something in the region of 270% of GDP by 2070. So the main reason, or one of the main reasons, is because of the cost of climate change mitigation. So if you're worried about government debt going through the roof, perhaps you might want to look at net zero policy and look at what we are spending money on with respect to that. But the other issue that they were particularly concerned about was population age structure and the costs of looking after the increasing aged population in the country over the next few decades, the costs to the NHS, the costs of social care infrastructure, and so on. And I just thought that was also pension costs as well that we're talking about. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind ourselves of the position of Matthew Paris here, who is a voice that is echoed by many others. But this was perhaps the most egregious example of it in the Times a few months ago. This was in March 2024. And just remind everybody what he said. I can't dispute the objector's belief that once assisted dying becomes normalized, we will become more apt to ask yourselves for how much longer we can justify the struggle. And of course, a lot of the pressure that's coming on people to end their lives and earlier is economic. So perhaps this is relevant. If assisted dying becomes common and widely accepted, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, will consider choosing this road when the time comes, and in some cases even ask themselves whether it would be selfish not to. Well, of course, if government debt is and the tax burden is going through the roof, and basically the tax paying, the proportion of the population which is paying taxes is shrinking, then perhaps it would be selfish to continue living, wouldn't it? He goes on, within a decade or more, assisted suicide will be seen as a normal road for many to take and be considered socially responsible, even finally urged upon people. And he had said, we may not be aware that our moral attitudes are being driven by the Darwinian struggle for survival, but in part they will be. They will be. And when we covered this first, I just wanted to remind everybody that this attitude is absolutely Fabian. So H.G. Wells, one of the founders of the Fabian Society, and this is something Ben's been talking about, at least Fabianism is something Ben's been talking about in the last week or two. Just remind everybody of his attitude to this, that the method that must in some cases still be called in is death, the merciful obliteration of weak and silly and pointless things. Future humans will naturally regard the modest suicide of the incurably melancholy or diseased or helpless persons as a high and courageous act of duty rather than a crime. And I just see that, again, looking at the direction of travel here, Debbie, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. But looking at the direction of travel, it's very, very clear that as the country gets into a more tricky situation with respect to the way that the age breakdown of the population develops and the debt burden that places on the country as a whole, the pressure to perhaps end our lives a little bit early is only going to increase.
Yeah, indeed. And to be honest, I was very interested in your H.G. Wells reference because one H.G. Wells reference that I hadn't heard of was humans in the year million. And if anybody hasn't seen it, perhaps we'll bring on a trailer, maybe on another news. But assisted dying, so medicalizing death, bullet points, medicalizing death. We're looking at MAID in Canada, so we're probably going to be following on from Canada. Citizens' jury have just pushed it forward. Who's on the citizens' jury? C40, mayors? What are we looking at? Also, clinical frailty scores. So when's going to be our expiry date as deemed by our doctors or perhaps artificial intelligence? Are we going to be coerced into death? And are we going to be seeing not science fiction, but science fact, Logan's Run? I don't know.
Yes.